In the Gospel of John, the word translated for miracles is the word sign, right? It's a sign. And I think the reason that's significant is because often when we think of miracles, we think of something that like is supernatural or like breaking the laws of physics or something like this, right? You know, like a miracle is like, oh, I'm floating in the air or something, right? You know, or something like this is a miracle. And that's actually, I think, a misunderstanding. Like, I mean, maybe perhaps, you know, that could be what a miracle is, like something that is, usually it's something that's sort of maybe extraordinary, right? And maybe it's something that, you know, defies how we understand how nature works, but that's really secondary and actually not critically important to how you understand what a miracle is. And the word sign, I think, gets a little bit more at the heart of it, which is the idea that you have the eyes to perceive that something is pointing to God, right? That something's a sign, that it's a message, that it's directing you in a certain way. And that might be something extraordinary, but it might be something completely everyday, right? And so the real key to having the ability to recognize something as miraculous, right? The ability to see life as everyday life as full of miracles, that is to say, full of signs, full of the fingerprints of God, full of instructions of where to find God, right? And all the miracles in the gospel story in John are described as signs, right? Because the whole point of them is not chiefly that, you know, someone is lame and now they're walking, or, you know, someone is sick and now they're not anymore. The main point is that those physical miracles were performed for people, the healings, so that they could recognize that God was in their midst, so they could give thanks, right? So they could pursue him. This same thing is true with the Magi. And that's who I want to focus on this morning, just to meditate a little bit more closely, is that they were able to recognize a sign, right? The star in the sky. And they followed him and found him there. And they were the, as far as you know on the accounts, the only ones who were able to recognize the sign, to interpret it properly and figure out where to go, and then be directed and find Jesus there. And so, you know, the star in the sky is kind of a more miraculous thing, but they were the only ones who were able to really understand what that meant. And furthermore, when they got there, what they found, and I think this demonstrates their faith, is, you know, here they are seeking out a Messiah, they're seeking out a king of some kind, which, by the way, it's most likely that the Magi were Zoroastrian priests and scholars of some kind. And the Zoroastrians have in their religion a whole tradition of messiahs coming to save the world, right, as well. So there's something a little, you know, congruous there between those. But they come, and what do they find? But they find, you know, a poor family from the tradesman class, with a woman who is not married, who had a child out of wedlock. I mean, there's nothing really extraordinary about what they find, right? You know, like a kid born in a barn is not necessarily what you think of as a miracle, right? And yet they recognized it, and even when they got there, they didn't get there and go, oh, we made a mistake, we should turn around, we must have miscalculated this, you know. No, they immediately offer their gifts, right? And so we see something here too, is that they're willing, the length that they're willing to go, right, to be able to recognize the sign, right, and then to when they see the sign, right, this indicator that God is here, they're willing to journey across the world to find it, and they're willing to pay any price to have it. And then they do that, and then they, you know, then they journey back to their own home. And so we could take them, and in this story, the gospel story today, we really have a contrasting with the Magi with Herod, right? And so they see this sign. Now, when Herod finds out about this sign, he reacts in a very different way, right? He's troubled by it. He's upset by it. This reminds me of several times in the different miracles where Jesus does things and people don't like it, right? You know, Jesus heals often on the Sabbath, and how do the Pharisees respond? Right? They're upset. They're upset that he broke the rules, right? They're troubled by this. Or the time when Jesus heals the demoniac, right? In the Gerasenes, and all the villagers, that's where he casts out the demon that goes into the swine run over the hill, all the swine die, and the people in the village come out and they're all upset and they tell him to leave, right? And so there's many times, just because you have a sign, just because you have a miracle, doesn't mean A, you're going to see it and recognize it when it shows up in your life, and B, that you're going to be happy about it. Right? And so what this really points to is the disposition of the Magi's hearts versus that of Herod, right? And they're very different. One, the condition of your heart allows you to recognize a thing happening as a sign, right? As a moment where God's breaking in, right? Where the veil between the spiritual realm is thin. And then to know how to properly respond to that in some way. And what we see here is that these signs, these miracles that are given to us are not cheap, right? To call to mind here the Syrophoenician woman who's chasing Jesus and begging for him to heal her daughter, and Jesus ignores her, and the disciples are getting annoyed too, and they're trying to shoo her away because she's not a Jew, right? She's a Gentile, and so they don't want anything to do with her, and yet she persists anyways. And then Jesus says to her, "Should I give the food of the children to the dogs?" Right? So he insults her, right? And then she persists nonetheless and says, "But even the dogs eat the crumbs from the master's table." And then he rejoices in her faith, right, in her long suffering, and he grants her the healing, her prayer that she wants. In the same way, the Magi, when they see the sign, they have to spend months journeying across the world. And then they bring gifts and they give great sacrifices, right, to God in this way. And this reminds us of what it means when God does show up in our lives, is that it's not just automatic, that it is a call to an adventure. It is a invitation to make a sacrifice of some kind. That the blessing of God in our lives, it occurs just like a crucifixion, always, in that it requires a great sacrifice of some kind, and then that's when the reward comes. But this is because this is how love works, right? That love, let's think of it this way. Think of, you're interested in somebody, and what are you looking for? You're looking for a sign that they like you back, right? And then think about what you're willing to do for that, how far you're willing to go, how much you're willing to put up with for somebody you're interested in that you would not otherwise. Think about how much money you're willing to spend to impress this person, right? And to win them over in some way, right? This is very, very similar, right? And it's about seeing the signs, right? It's about having the eye to see it. And just because once you see the sign that this person likes you, that doesn't mean that it's over now. It means it's just begun. And that's what a sign is. A miracle is the beginning of something. And so when we think about what is Christmas, it's the beginning of something, right? One, it's the beginning of this whole life of Christ. How the whole life of Christ, from his birth to his death and his resurrection, is all this revelation. It's all a sign. It's all an invitation that we can then imitate and journey with God on this journey that he's inviting us to. And so when we think about how do we be like the Magi, and not like Herod or the Pharisees, that we can actually recognize a sign, and then when it comes, we know how to properly respond to it in some way. Well, we have to have hearts that Christ can be born into. Right? And we think about, where was Christ born? He was born in a cave. This cave that he was born in, which is also the tomb he died in, is the chamber of our hearts. And it's in that dark and secret place of our own heart, right? Where our true self lies, that if we're willing to make space and room for God there, then he can be born there, right? Then when that sign and miracle happens, right, it doesn't just sort of bounce off us and deflect. It's not something that we sort of miss, someone who lacks sort of the good dating and social cues to pick up on when somebody likes them, right? And the opportunity for that great catch just passes you by, right? It's not like that. It's that we have cultivated our hearts day after day with spiritual practices so that when the sign comes, right, that it triggers a birth of Christ in our hearts. And this is what Christmas is about. It's about recognizing that miracle, that those miracles are all around us. They're often hidden. They're often in everyday moments and experiences. And if our heart is open to it, like the openness of the cave he was born in, or the openness of the tomb in which he was resurrected and then reborn in, that Christ can be born and reborn in our own hearts. And that's the miracle of Christmas that happens every day. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.